Most people cannot imagine what would drive other human beings to enact twisted crimes. But unfortunately, there are people who will stop at nothing to get what they want. Number 5. There are few true crime cases more twisted than the crimes of Susan Monica. Monica took the lives of 2 men and claimed to have 17 more bodies buried on her farm. If it were not for a small mistake, Monica might have gotten away with her disturbing crimes. It was as police searched for Robert Haney that her crimes came out. Robert was a 56-year-old divorced father who liked to live a simple life. He worked as a handyman for Monica and had an agreement with her that he could work for cash in part. He lived on the farm in Oregon, a large space that was mostly off-grid. Sometimes it wouldn't even have running water or electricity, but it suited Robert fine. It was normal for his children to not hear from him for short periods, but when months passed with no word from their father, Robert's children got worried. On January 1st, 2014, they took the drive to the farm to try to find out why they hadn't heard from their father in 2 months. Monica told them Robert had abruptly quit and asked the children to take his belongings. Those belongings included his dog and work tools. Even if Robert had quit out of the blue, his children couldn't imagine him leaving these things behind. They suspected something more sinister was going on and called the police to report him missing. When the police arrived at the farm, Monica told them the same story. Robert had left and asked her to look after his dog. This time, as she tried to cover up her disturbing crime, Monica added a few more details. He had been acting funny for a while after receiving a call from a female relative about an assault. Robert had started drinking, a story his children had heard before, then decided to leave. Police continued to treat the case as a disappearance, but tracking him wouldn't be easy, as Robert didn't use bank accounts. They then discovered that he had an EBT card, which had been used in December at a Walmart just 25 minutes from the farm. When police checked the security tapes at the Walmart, they found Monica was the one that had used the card. It was obvious a crime had taken place, but just how chilling that crime was yet to be discovered. Police went back to the farm to investigate a potential fraud case. They found a human leg in one of the ponds, and it had been cut with an axe. After questioning, Monica confessed to taking Robert's life. She said he had come back months after he quit. Monica had found him in her pig pen while the pigs were in a feeding frenzy. According to her, she took his life out of mercy when she couldn't stop the pigs. Then, Monica admitted his remains wouldn't be the only ones police found on the farm. She drew a map and placed an X near the middle. There, they would find Stephen Delcino. Stephen was another handyman who had gone missing about a year before Robert. This time, Monica said Stephen had stolen a weapon from her. As they wrestled over the weapon, it went off and a bullet struck Stephen in the head. He continued to fight and she fired on him again, but Monica claimed it was in self-defense. When asked if there was anything else police should know, she allegedly told officers that she had 17 other bodies and she would spend the rest of her life behind bars. A search of the property didn't turn up any more bodies, but police did find a large pile of shoes, which could never be explained. In court, the jury didn't believe her self-defense story. Monica was found guilty of taking Robert and Stephen's lives in cold blood and handed a life sentence for her twisted crimes. She won't be eligible for parole until 2065. Number 4. In 1981, a man called the police with a tip about a woman's body. He wouldn't give his name, citing national security reasons, but the information he did give was accurate. 40 years on, the woman's identity is still unknown. The call came in to the police in Yorkshire. There was a woman's body near the Scroughton Moor house. The caller gave precise directions and indicated that the woman had been there for a while. When asked his name, he refused to give it, citing the aforementioned security reasons. Police followed the instructions anyway and discovered the woman's body, hidden in a patch of 6-foot-tall rose bay willow herb near Sutton Bank. At first, the woman was given the name the Sutton Bank woman, but as police investigated this chilling crime, The woman took a new alias. Investigations into the twisted crime proved that the woman had been there for about 2 years. A yogurt lid found under her body was dated to 1979, and the vegetation surrounding the body had been growing for at least 1 year. The woman was estimated to be between 38 and 40 years old, and she had given birth to between 1 and 3 children. She was white, with dark brown hair, and had a spinal abnormality, which would have given her back pain and caused her to hold her head at an angle. Early in the investigation, police learned of a technique that had created a wax model of an ancient Egyptian mummy. They decided to use the same technique to try to uncover the woman's identity. A wax model of her head was created, and the woman was given the nickname the Wax Head Woman. Thousands of tips were called in, and all were thoroughly investigated. The investigators located 164 missing women who were suggested as potential answers to this strange mystery, but none matched the Jane Doe. One suggestion was that she might be Geraldine Elizabeth Crawley, a convicted criminal who had escaped prison in 1979. When the theory was made public, Crawley wrote a letter to investigators which included her fingerprints and wished them luck with their investigation. The case went cold and remains an unsolved mystery to this day. Police are now using modern techniques to try to identify the woman and figure out who had left her in the undergrowth. Her DNA is on file, and a number of people researching their family trees have reached out with missing relatives who might be the Waxhead Woman. But again, none of the tips have worked out. The mystery caller who alerted the police to the woman has also never been identified. The mention of national security was likely a lie used by the man as an excuse to hide his identity, but it also raises the possibility that the Waxhead Woman might have been mixed up in something serious. Police have urged anyone who believes they have answers to this twisted, unsolved mystery to get in touch. Number 3. Most countries will have their own twisted serial killers who aren't really well known outside of those countries. For Hungary, that twisted individual is a man named Peter Kovács. Kovács lived in Hungary in the 1960s, and from the outside looked perfectly ordinary, with a good family and a good job. The image allowed him to take the lives of 4 women before his acts caught up with him. The first victim was a young woman named Margit Saletti. Margit worked at a shoe factory in the town of Martfu. On the evening of July 22nd, 1957, she left work and began the walk home along a quiet vineyard road. As she walked, she was approached by a man and struck in the head with an iron bar. The man took her life and left her in a drainage ditch. The next day, police discovered the terrifying crime. Margit was identified, and soon police had a suspect, a man named Janos Kurjak, who also worked at the factory. He was married but separated from his wife. He'd asked Margit to date him multiple times, but she rejected his advances. Janos had actually been home alone that night, but lied to police that he was having dinner with his mother because he didn't believe they would believe him. His mother didn't back up his alibi. Police were under a lot of political pressure to solve this disturbing crime and forced Janos to confess. He was found guilty of the crime despite the fact that there was no physical evidence linking him to the crime, and a witness described a man that looked nothing like Janos as the criminal. At first, it seemed as if the criminal had been caught. Martfu returned to its status as a quiet village. But in November of 1963, another young woman was attacked in the nearby village of Homuk. She managed to escape her attacker, but the police couldn't track him down. 4 months later, another woman was attacked and again managed to escape. Then, in May of 1964, a woman's body was pulled from a river. She looked as if she'd been in the water for a month, but police couldn't find any sign of foul play. A year later, another body was pulled from the same river. Again, the police did not rule it as foul play. On June 20th, 1967, another woman's body was found near the Koros River. This time, there were obvious signs of foul play. She'd been struck in the head and violently attacked. Police found many small fragments of glass around her body, which would be the clue that finally caught the monster of Martfu. Attention was drawn to Peter Kovács. Kovács was a truck driver who lived in the area. He was already one of 40 men that had been looked at by police, but he was ruled out because he had a good family and a good job. Now police were looking at the truck that was used for that job. The day before the final victim was found, Kovacs had hit a fence after brake failure, which resulted in a smashed window on his truck. Inside the truck and on Kovacs' clothes, police found shards of glass that were the same as those found near the body. A witness also placed Kovacs with the victim and his brother-in-law at the pub on the day of the chilling crime. The brother-in-law claimed Kovacs had offered to drive the woman home. Finally, with all of the evidence against him, Kovacs admitted to taking the woman's life. He also admitted to the 2 attacks in 1963 and 1964, and taking the lives of the 2 other women found in the river. And finally, he admitted to taking Margit Zaletti's life. Kovacs had no connection with her. She had just been in the wrong place at the wrong time when he was looking for a victim. Janos was released from prison, but the neighbors in his village still treated him like a criminal and he was forced to move. Kovacs would be found guilty of his twisted crimes and became known as Hungary's most notorious criminal. Number 2. When Francisco Merlos went to his fiance's home in Oklahoma City in August of 2016, he had hoped to patch things up with her after an argument a few days before. Instead, he found a chilling crime scene and his fiance's unfazed mother. The victim in this twisted crime was 33-year-old Geneva Gomez. Geneva had always had a close relationship with her mother. The two worked together and were said to be as close as sisters, but her mother, Juanita, apparently decided she didn't like her daughter's fiance. She accused him of stealing from her and demanded Geneva get her things and leave him. Francisco gave Geneva some space, but when he hadn't heard from her in 2 days, he decided to go to the house to make sure that she was okay. Juanita opened the door and Francisco started by apologizing for any misunderstanding. When he asked where Geneva was, Juanita said she was in her bedroom. What Francisco found was shocking. Geneva was on her bed with her arms stretched at her sides and a heavy crucifix placed on her chest. She had been attacked so badly that her face was unrecognizable. At first, Juanita tried to lock Francisco in the house, but he managed to get out and call the authorities. Juanita didn't seem bothered at all about the twisted crime she had just committed. She explained to officers that she believed her daughter was possessed by the devil. She had tried to force a cross and a religious medallion down her own daughter's throat, then struck her repeatedly. After Geneva had passed away, Juanita had washed and positioned her daughter's body. Geneva had tried to fight back, and Juanita had bruises on her own arms, but she couldn't overpower her mother. Juanita seemed to realize she was going to get in trouble at some point, as she tried to fake memory loss and pretend that she was mentally unstable. Court psychologists found that wasn't the case, and she could be tried for her horrific crime. She was found guilty and will spend the rest of her life in prison. Number 1. The butler did it has become a long-standing trope in crime fiction, but in this case, the butler was the criminal in this twisted true crime story. Archibald Hall was a con artist. He had spent much of his youth in and out of prison for thievery, but as he became an adult, he decided to go on a different route to earn his riches. He took lessons on elocution, read up on high society living, and did everything to become the perfect example of a member of the upper class. When he left prison, he assumed the alias of Roy Fontaine and got work as a butler for the wealthy and elite. For a while, this was Lady Margaret Hudson. Hall had a good life with Lady Hudson, but that was threatened to be exposed when she hired a new gamekeeper in 1977. Soon he would start to commit his more twisted crimes. David Wright was an ex-con who had met Hall in prison. Wright would blackmail Hall, threatening to tell Lady Hudson where they'd first met if he didn't stump up the cash. Hall put up with it for a while, but finally decided that he'd had enough when Wright stole a ring from their employer. Hall insisted that he return it, and that night, Wright got drunk and fired a weapon at Hall while he slept. The bullet hit the headboard. The next morning, Wright didn't seem to think there was anything wrong when Hall invited him to go hunt rabbits. Hall waited until Wright was out of ammunition before firing at him. Wright's body was buried in a shallow grave. Hall soon found a new job working as a butler for ex-MP Walter Travis Scott Elliott and his wife Dorothy. The couple were very wealthy and owned plenty of jewelry and antiques. They trusted Hall enough to allow him to sign bank checks on their behalf. But Hall hadn't left his criminal ways behind. On December 8, 1977, Hall and an accomplice named Michael Kiddo arrived at the couple's penthouse apartment in Chelsea. Walter was asleep and Dorothy had an appointment. The two criminals were surprised to discover Dorothy was still at the house. They attacked her and smothered her with a pillow. A third accomplice was brought into the mix. Mary Coggle pretended to be Mrs. Scott Elliott and took the money from the couple's bank account. They then loaded Mr. Scott Elliott into a car, put his wife's body in the back, and drove to Scotland. There, they took Walter's life and buried the couple in separate shallow graves. Hall's disturbing crimes weren't over yet. Mary would be the next victim, as Hall and Kiddo thought that she would get them caught. She was attacked with a poker and dumped in the stream. The final victim was Hall's own brother, Donald Hall. Hall was released from prison in January of 1978. The two brothers did not get along and saw Donald as a threat. Hall and Kiddo tricked him into letting them tie him up, then smothered him with a chloroform-soaked cloth. As in other cases, the body was loaded into the back of a car. This time, though, the criminals were driving a car with false license plates. This would finally be their undoing. On their journey to dump Donald's body, a hotel owner became suspicious of the pair and called the police. Police noticed the incorrect plates on the vehicle and searched it. Donald's body was still in the bag. Hall confessed to his crimes and was given life in prison with no possibility of parole. His accomplice received 4 life sentences, one for each of the lives that he took. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.